before I get back to calls, let me play this interesting, somewhat clip of Elon Musk versus BBC. That's a far-left extremist foreign outlet that purports to be serving themselves against Britain, the UK. I got this from 3 or 4 different sources. Texas Lindsay, Jack Posobiec, shout out to Jack Posobiec, Jeffrey Younger, I think, the chief nerd. Elon Musk, the owner of Twitter, shut down this pro-censorship BBC reporter, real name James Clayton, and left him scrambling on how to justify his own questions on misinformation and supposed rise in hate speech. 4 minutes long, clip 13. Here it is.
We've spoken to people very recently who were involved in moderation, and they just say there's not enough people to police this stuff, particularly around hate speech in the company.
Hate speech?
Is that something that you want to address?
Talking about? I mean, you use Twitter,
right?
Do you see a rise in hate speech?
I mean,
but just a personal anecdote. Like, what do you? I don't.
Personally, my for you, I would see I get more of that kind of content. Yeah, personally, but I'm not going to talk to the rest of for the rest of Twitter.
You see more hate speech personally.
I would say I would see more hateful content in that.
Content you don't like or hateful. What do you mean to describe a hateful thing?
Yeah, I mean, just content that will solicit a reaction, something that may include something that is slightly racist or slightly sexist, those kinds of things.
So you think if something is slightly sexist, it should be banned?
No,
is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying anything. I'm
just curious. I'm trying to understand what you mean by hateful content, and I'm asking for specific examples. And you just said that if something is slightly sexist, that's hateful content. Does that mean that it should be banned?
Well, you've asked me whether my feed, whether it's got less or more. I'd say it's got slightly more.
That's why I'm asking for examples. Can you name one example?
I honestly don't use. Honestly, I
don't. You can't name a single example.
I'll tell you why. Because I don't actually use that for you feed anymore. Because I just don't particularly like it.
But you said
actually, a lot of people are quite similar. I only look at
hang on a second.
My
you said you've seen more hateful content, but you can't name a single example, not even one.
I'm not sure I've used that feed for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And
then how did you see the hateful content?
Because I've been using Twitter since you've taken it over for the last 6 months.
Okay, so then you must have at some point seen for you hateful content. I'm asking for one example.
Right.
And you can't give a single one.
And I'm saying
then I say, sir, that you don't know what you're talking about.
Really?
Yes, because you can't give me a single example of hateful content, not even one tweet, and yet you claimed that the hateful content was high.
Well,
that's false.
No, what I claimed...
You just lied.
What I claimed
Liar.
was... there are many organizations that say that kind of information is on the rise. Now, whether it has on my feed or not, I mean, right, and
literally
if you look at something
one.
like the Strategic Dialogue Institute in the UK, they will say that. So
look, people will say all sorts of nonsense. I'm literally asking for a single example, and you can't name one.
Right, and as I already said, I don't use that feed. But
then how would you know?
I don't think this is getting anywhere.
You literally said you experienced more hateful content, and then couldn't name a single example.
Right, and as I said,
that's absurd.
I haven't actually looked at that feed.
Then how would you know there's hateful content?
Because I'm saying that's what I saw a few weeks ago. I can't give you an exact example. Let's move on. We only have a certain amount of time.
Is he white?
COVID misinformation. You changed the COVID misinformation.
Has BBC changed the COVID misinformation?
The BBC does not set the rules on Twitter, so I'm asking you.
No, I'm talking about the BBC's misinformation about COVID.
I'm literally asking you about, you changed the labels, the COVID misinformation labels. There used to be a policy, it then disappeared. Why do that?
Well, COVID is no longer an issue.
Oh.
Does the BBC hold itself at all responsible for misinformation regarding masking and side effects of vaccinations?
Well, I disavow.
And not reporting on that at all?
There are none.
And what about the fact that the BBC was put under pressure by the British government to change its editorial policy? Are you aware of that?
Whoa.
This is not an interview about the BBC.
Oh, you thought it wasn't?
I see now why you've done Twitter Spaces. I am not a representative of the BBC's editorial policy. I want to make that clear. Let's talk about something else. You want to talk about the BBC?
You too.
All right, let's talk about something else.
You weren't expecting that.
Let's talk about something else.
I'm interviewing you too, is what he said. Sounded kind of serious. Elon Musk, South African man, pressuring that guy. I can't think of... JLP always makes the point. When you ask for an example, you put him on the spot. He can't think about any He can't think of an example of a hateful, slightly sexist or slightly racist, slightly different feed on his feed. Chats, tweets. That just means that there's purportedly, if that's even true, a little bit more free speech and less manipulation against real talk on Twitter. If that's even true. Because he cited some government, some organization that said, oh, more sexism and racism, the N-word. And there was all of these people shooting the N-word, tweeting the N-word and all that mess. Ridiculous. And I think that guy, and I use the term loosely, was white. This James Clayton. You can't give me a single example of this hateful content. What are they worried about? Hate speech. There's no such thing. Stupid. In the UK, more like C-U-K. Sorry, don't say that, kids. Don't sound it out. Elon also called out the BBC's misinformation narrative. Reporters are used to editing out lies and embarrassing missteps. The fact that this was recorded completely exposes the incompetence and venality, whatever that word is, don't repeat it, kids, of BBC reporters. So says Jeff Younger, I think. Musk turned the tables on that BBC interviewer, James Clayton, calling out his own flawed COVID misinformation. He said COVID is no longer an issue. It's still an issue, Elon. I guess I disavow that. And side effects are normal. I said it. I misspoke when I said there are no side effects with the vax. There are side effects, but it's normal. And it's expected that some people will die, just not that many. Very rare. Anyway. That's from my channel. This is not an interview about the BBC. Oh, you thought it wasn't. Anyway, that's Elon Musk. Interestingly, Ian Miles Cheong, still gray, independent journalist guy. He's what? What is he? Indonesian, I think. Yeah, it's true. Ironically, the BBC journalist said, let's move on. We only have a certain amount of time. But he ended up cutting off his interview short by 30 minutes. And this somebody named ALX and CB Doge and Whole Mars blog, Whole Mars catalog, and then Ian Miles Cheong himself took over the Twitter space with much better questions than anything that this James Clayton BBC person who surrenders to evil in favor of against good. Anyway. Nice. Right on. Shout out to Elon Musk, I guess. Keeping the pressure on them. Based. And I use the term loosely, very loosely.